What the fuck do you think you're doing here? The words, dripping with a venom reserved for vermin, sliced through the sterile air of the Chicago Federal Building lobby. Security Officer Miller, a man whose polished badge couldn't hide the tarnish on his soul, blocked the entrance, his body a wall of cheap authority and unearned confidence. This building isn't for your kind. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss, a foul mix of stale coffee and pure hatred. One word from me, and I could make you disappear. Poof! The woman stood motionless, a marble statue amidst the morning rush. Her expression was a locked room, impenetrable. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, she reached into her purse. Have you ever been judged, truly judged, in the first 3 seconds of meeting someone? Judged not by your words, not by your actions, but by the skin you were born in? If you have, you know the cold fire that was building behind this woman's eyes. And if you believe that a reckoning is coming for men like this, hit that subscribe button right now, because you are about to witness an act of karmic justice so pure, so devastating, it will leave you breathless. She produced an identification card, her fingers steady as a surgeon's as she extended it. Miller snatched it from her hand like he was grabbing a soiled rag. He gave it a 1-second glance before a smirk curdled his lips. He let it fall from his fingers, fluttering to the polished floor between them. Pick it up, he commanded. The order was a physical blow, meant to humiliate, to force submission. He watched, his eyes hungry, as she bent slowly, retrieving the small piece of plastic that supposedly defined her. I don't care what fake ID you cooked up. This is a secure federal facility. He gestured with a thumb toward a small, sterile table beside the security checkpoint. Empty your purse, everything. His eyes flicked dismissively to the other employees, all white, who streamed past like a river flowing around a rock. None of them stopped, none of them inspected. The woman methodically, deliberately, removed each item from her purse. A leather wallet, a pen, a small notebook, a tube of lipstick. Each placement was precise, a calculated movement in a silent battle of wills. Miller hovered, scrutinizing every object with an exaggerated theatrical suspicion, his breath a constant, unwelcome presence in her space. As she carefully, meticulously repacked her belongings, she looked directly into his eyes, a laser beam cutting through his bluster. Do you know who I am? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but it was not soft. It was the sound of a steel door locking into place. Miller let out a harsh, barking laugh that echoed unpleasantly through the vast, impersonal lobby. Just another nobody trying to be somebody, he sneered. But he was wrong. She was not a nobody. She was, in that exact moment, his worst fucking nightmare. At precisely 8:47 a.m., Isabel Sterling, the newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stepped through the revolving doors of the Chicago field office. She had chosen her attire with tactical precision. Charcoal slacks, a simple navy blouse, deliberately understated. Power, she knew, didn't always need to announce itself. Sometimes it was more effective as an ambush. Today was not about pulling rank or flashing credentials. It was about seeing the guts of the machine, seeing how the gears truly turned when the operator wasn't expected. Officer Gregory Miller stood at his post, 15 years of service distilled into a paunch that strained his uniform, and an ego that strained credulity. His eyes, the dull, predatory eyes of a bottom feeder, tracked Isabel the moment she entered. He saw a black woman, and his entire world, a grim and tiny kingdom built on prejudice, immediately classified her as other. Threat. Unbelonging. This wasn't a thought process. It was a reflex, as ingrained and unconscious as breathing. ID and purpose of visit, he grunted, the words a challenge, not a request. He didn't bother with eye contact. In his mind, the narrative was already written. What's she doing here without a white escort? Lost, probably. Maybe the new cleaning crew, too stupid to know the service entrance is in the back. Flashes, quick and electric, that would later surface from his personnel file. 4 separate complaints of excessive and targeted screening, all mysteriously dismissed. 2 formal grievances that had vanished from the system as if they'd never existed. It wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was a pattern, a meticulously maintained system of abuse. To Miller's right, a white businessman in an expensive suit approached the checkpoint. "Morning, Frank," Miller called out, his voice suddenly syrupy with camaraderie. He waved the man through with a cursory glance at his badge. "How's that golf handicap treating you?" A white woman followed, her oversized designer purse uninspected as Miller buzzed her through with a leering smile. "Have a great day, Ms. Albright." Then he turned back to Isabel, the mask of civility dropping to reveal the raw ugliness beneath. His expression hardened, his jaw setting like concrete. He beckoned to his partner at the adjacent station, a man named Schmidt with weary eyes and the posture of someone who had long ago surrendered his spine. "Hey, Schmidt, got another one trying to slip through?" he said, his voice just loud enough for Isabel to hear, a deliberate and calculated insult. "Probably cleaning staff that don't know their place." Schmidt glanced up. A flicker of something. Discomfort? Shame crossed his features before he gave a non-committal shrug and looked away. Silence is complicity. What do you think? Drop a comment below. Would you have spoken up, or would you have stayed silent like Schmidt? Miller slid Isabel's ID back across the counter, and just as she reached for it, he deliberately pulled his hand away, letting it clatter to the floor. His eyes locked with hers, a direct challenge, an unspoken dare. Bend, submit. Know your place. As Isabel Sterling stooped to retrieve her identification, Gregory Miller didn't just make a mistake. He committed career suicide in front of a live, captive audience. He just didn't know it yet. Isabel rose slowly, the ID card pinched between her thumb and forefinger. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, a study in controlled fury. The air crackled with unspoken tension. She met Miller's gaze, her own eyes a blank slate, revealing nothing of the furious, high-speed calculation happening behind them. "May I have your name and badge number, please?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried an undeniable authority, the kind of voice that wasn't accustomed to repeating itself. Miller scoffed, his hand instinctively moving to cover the nameplate on his uniform. "Why? So you can file another little complaint that'll end up in the shredder?" The fluorescent lights caught the sheen of sweat beading on his forehead, a strange sight in the building's aggressive meat locker chill. Beside him, Schmidt shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes darting between Isabel, his partner, and the exit, a trapped animal looking for an escape. His discomfort was a tangible thing, a thick, cloying fog of cowardice. "I have an appointment," Isabel stated. It wasn't a plea, it was a fact. No defensiveness, no anger, just the simple, unadorned truth. "With who?" Miller demanded, grabbing the desk phone like a weapon. He deliberately, crudely, misspelled her name as he spoke into the receiver, watching her with a performative, theatrical suspicion. "Yeah, Sterling. Sturl." He paused, holding the phone away from his ear. "Nope. No Isabel Sterling on the visitor list for today," he announced with a triumphant sneer. "No appointment exists." "Check again," Isabel suggested, her voice still impossibly calm. "Perhaps under Director Sterling?" Miller's laugh came out as a short, ugly bark. "Director? Lady, the only thing you're directing is a mess. Listen, there's no appointment. You need to leave the premises now, or I will have you physically removed for trespassing." His hand drifted down, a subtle, unconscious movement towards the butt of his weapon. It was a tell, a sign of his eagerness to escalate. Across the lobby, a young data analyst named Jenna looked up from a file. Her brow furrowed. A memo. There was a memo circulated last week. Effective immediately, Director Sterling will be conducting surprise inspections of field offices throughout the quarter. Her eyes widened in recognition. Jenna took a half step forward, a silent no forming on her lips, then hesitated. Her mind did a rapid, brutal calculation. Personal risk versus moral obligation. Interfere and face Miller's wrath, maybe even a report to his uncle, a senior VP at Aegis Secure Solutions, the contractor that employed them all. Stay silent and let this injustice play out. I'm not leaving, Isabel said, her voice a flat, immovable object. I have legitimate business in this building. That was it. Miller stepped out from behind the security desk, physically invading her personal space. That's it. You're done. He was shouting now, his voice rising, a performance for the gallery of curious onlookers. He needed to create a scene, to paint her as the unhinged aggressor. You're making a colossal mistake, she said. It wasn't a plea. It was a goddamn prophecy. His radio was already in his hand. We'll see about that, he snarled, relishing his power. Isabel looked him dead in the eye. You have exactly 5 seconds to step aside, or I promise you will regret ever putting on that badge. Security backup to main entrance. Miller's voice crackled through the radio, a beacon of his own stupidity. Have a belligerent trespasser female refusing to comply. He never took his eyes off her face. He pointed to a hard plastic chair bolted to the wall. Sit, now. Isabel evaluated her options with the cold, clinical precision of a grandmaster assessing a chessboard. Causing a scene here served his narrative. But documenting this encounter, this raw, unfiltered display of systemic rot, served hers. She took the seat. Her back was ramrod straight, her hands folded primly in her lap. She was a queen on a throne of cheap plastic, turning the lobby into her courtroom as curious eyes and smartphone cameras turned toward the unfolding spectacle. Attempting to infiltrate a federal building, Miller announced loudly, for the benefit of the crowd. Claims to have an appointment that doesn't exist, probably a domestic terrorist. Schmidt approached him, his voice a low, nervous whisper. Greg, maybe we should just run her credentials again, do a deeper dive in the central database. Back to your post, Schmidt, Miller snapped, cutting him off at the knees. I've got this handled. For exactly 23 minutes, Isabel noted the precise time on the large digital clock on the wall. Miller made her wait. She watched him process 17 other visitors during that period. 15 white, 2 Asian, all with minimal cursory screening. All while she sat in the harshest spotlight of public view, a living exhibit in a museum of bigotry. Stand up, Miller finally commanded. He pulled a pair of latex gloves from a dispenser with a theatrical snap. Time for an enhanced security check. Isabel rose, her eyes locked with his. Neutral, unflinching. She was cataloging every microaggression, every witness, every camera angle. Remove your jacket, shoes too. His voice was pitched just loud enough for nearby visitors to turn and stare, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and mild alarm. People like you, he said, the phrase hanging in the air like poison gas, are known to conceal things. People like you. She complied. Arms out. Miller's gloved hands moved along her sides, pausing, lingering inappropriately at her ribs for a moment too long. Standard procedure, he added, with a smirk that twisted the words into something predatory and foul. A rustle of movement broke the charged silence. It was Jenna, the young analyst. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with nervous determination. She approached, carrying a small paper cup of water, extending it toward Isabel. "Thought you might need this," Jenna said, leaning in to whisper, her voice trembling slightly. "I know who you are." Isabel accepted the water with a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Stand down." Her eyes communicated what her voice could not. "Don't get caught in the blast radius." It was too late. Miller intercepted the cup, knocking it from Isabel's hand. Water splashed across the polished marble floor. "You don't interact with suspects," he barked at Jenna, his face a mask of fury. "Return to your workspace immediately, or I will write you up for interfering with official security protocol." Throughout this ritual of humiliation, Isabel's gaze was a systematic recording device. Faces in the crowd, name badges of employees who looked away. Schmidt, wringing his hands at his station. The precise location of the security camera in the northeast corner of the ceiling. The exact timestamp on the digital display above the elevators. The receptionist who was now pretending to be fascinated by her computer screen, her neck flushed in shame. Isabel wasn't just enduring this, she was embalming it, preserving every last ugly detail for the record. "Put your shoes back on," Miller finally said, his tone suggesting he was bestowing a great favor. As he turned to grab his radio, it crackled to life. His supervisor's voice, bored and routine. "Miller, report to Station 2. We have a package inspection." The radio went silent. Miller was visibly annoyed by the interruption. He glared at Isabel. "Don't move," he ordered, before stalking away. In his absence, she made her move. It wasn't born from panic or desperation. It was a maneuver of calculated lethal efficiency. With subtle, fluid movements, she reached into her jacket pocket and extracted her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing 3 characters into a secure messaging app. SOP 7. Standard Operating Procedure 7. Nothing more was needed. Miles away, in a secure room at FBI headquarters, Deputy Director Marcus Thorne's phone vibrated once. He looked down at the screen. SOP 7. His expression shifted instantly from routine bureaucratic fatigue to razor-sharp focus. He picked up a secure red line, initiating a cascade of predetermined actions. No questions, no confirmation. Protocol established on Director Sterling's first day. The hunt was on. Miller returned, his stride arrogant, his eyes narrowed with a renewed sense of purpose. "In here," he commanded, gesturing toward a small, windowless security office. The room was a concrete box, furnished with nothing but a metal desk and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. An interrogation room designed for intimidation. He closed the door, the click of the lock unnervingly final. "Phone," he demanded, his palm outstretched. "Security procedure." Isabel surrendered the device. The message had been sent. The trap had been set. He placed it in a heavy metal drawer, locking it with theatrical emphasis. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a confidential, conspiratorial whisper as he leaned against the desk. "People who don't belong, they just disappear in our system sometimes. Paperwork gets lost. Access gets denied permanently." He smiled, a dead, joyless thing that didn't reach his cold eyes. "No one would even look for someone like you." The moment Miller exited the room to retrieve some forms, Isabel's gaze snapped to the small, dark dome of the security camera in the upper corner of the ceiling. She positioned herself precisely in its view, facing the lens directly, as if addressing a live audience. "For the record," she stated, her voice clear and steady, "Officer Gregory Miller has just threatened that people who don't belong disappear all the time. Tort." He further stated, "No one would even look for someone like you, while confiscating my personal property and detaining me without cause." Her eyes then caught the landline phone on the desk. She lifted the receiver, dialing a number from memory. Authentication code 9177 Foxtrot, she stated when the line connected. Silent protocol. Field Office Chicago, main entrance security. No intervention. I repeat, no intervention. She replaced the receiver just as the sound of Miller's approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway. The screen splits. A tale of two cities. In one, Isabel sits, composed, in a barren concrete box. In the other, across the city, her executive team mobilizes with the practiced efficiency of a special forces unit. Deputy Director Thorne notifies his senior staff. Within minutes, 16 senior FBI officials, including the heads of Internal Affairs and the Civil Rights Division, are watching a live feed from a security office in their own Chicago branch. They are recording every word, every gesture. One of Thorne's aides has his finger hovering over a red button that would dispatch a SWAT team to the location. "Sir?" the aide asks, his voice taut with tension. "Director's orders?" Thorne watches the screen, his face a grim mask. He sees her calm, her control. He understands. "Let it play out," he orders, his voice gravelly. Per the director's instructions, she's not just documenting a crime, she's exposing a conspiracy from the inside. Miller returns, a self-satisfied smile playing on his lips, blissfully unaware that every person who could end his career, his life as he knows it, is now watching his every move. He slapped a thick sheaf of papers onto the metal desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the small, confined space. "Detention documentation," he announced with smug, bureaucratic satisfaction. "You have officially failed to meet security clearance requirements for this federal facility." He slid the forms towards her, tapping a finger on the signature line at the bottom. "Sign here. It acknowledges you were denied entry for non-compliance." Isabel's eyes scanned the document, her brain processing the legalese at lightning speed. And there it was, buried in paragraph 4, a full waiver of her rights, an agreement that she would not pursue legal action for her treatment. "I'm not signing this," she stated, her voice flat. Miller's jaw tightened. For a moment, his mask of mock professionalism slipped, revealing the raw frustration beneath. He reached for his coffee cup, positioned precariously close to the edge of the desk. With a movement that was far too deliberate to be accidental, his elbow nudged the cup. Hot, dark liquid splashed across the front of Isabel's navy blouse. "Oh, clumsy me," Miller said, his voice dripping with false sincerity as he produced a handful of rough paper napkins. "Here, let me help you with that." Isabel accepted the napkins without a word, dabbing at the rapidly spreading stain while maintaining unwavering eye contact. "Thank you," she said, each syllable precisely measured, a tiny, sharp piece of glass. The door opened. A man in a crisp suit stood in the doorway, his ID badge identifying him as Mr. Evans, the office manager. "Is there an issue here, officer?" Evans asked, his gaze shifting nervously between Miller's sneer and Isabel's stained blouse. "Security matter, Evans," Miller replied curtly. "This is not your department." "Well, this woman has been detained for nearly an hour," Evans persisted, a flicker of courage in his eyes. "Has her identity been properly verified through the central database?" Miller's entire posture changed. He straightened up, puffing out his chest, a predator sensing a challenge to his territory. "You know, maybe I should review your security access credentials, Evans. See if they're still appropriate for your position." The threat, naked and brutally effective, hung in the air between them. Evans's resolve visibly crumbled. His gaze dropped to the floor. Just following up on unusual activity reports," he mumbled, already retreating back into the hallway. "I'll find you later, Evans," Miller called after him, the promise unmistakable. Back at FBI headquarters, The command room was a hive of controlled, furious activity. Analysts had pulled Miller's entire personnel file, 17 similar incidents over 12 years. Each complaint was mysteriously closed without action, and each one was connected, through a labyrinth of bureaucratic misdirection and outright corruption, to the same security contractor, Aegis Secure Solutions, the same company where Miller's uncle was a senior vice president. In the small, windowless room, Miller turned back to Isabel. With no witnesses present, all pretense of professionalism was gone. "You're kind," he spat. "Always thinks the rules don't apply. Always looking for special treatment, a handout." His voice dropped lower, becoming more venomous, more personal. "But I'm here to make sure everybody gets exactly what they deserve. And you know what happens to troublemakers who end up in custody?" He leaned in close, his breath hot and sour. "They have accidents. They trip down stairs. They resist, and they get hurt. Badly." "I need medical attention," Isabel announced suddenly, one hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "My heart is racing. I'm feeling faint. I'd like a witness present for any medical evaluation." Miller studied her, his eyes narrowing, searching for any sign of deception. "Convenient timing. No one's falling for that old trick." "I'm not acting," Isabel responded, her voice even, "and denying medical care to a person in custody is a direct violation of Section 4.7 of the Federal Security Protocols." Miller's surprise was visible for a split second, a flicker of shock that she would know the specific protocol, before his mask of authority slammed back into place. "Claiming medical distress to obstruct a federal security procedure," he said, making a great show of writing this down on a notepad. "Possible psychological instability noted." He was creating a paper trail, building his wall of lies brick by careful brick. Isabel watched him with the detached clinical interest of a scientist watching a rat navigate a maze of its own making. The door opened again. It was Schmidt, his partner, uncertainty and fear warring on his face. "Any update on the identity verification?" he asked, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Isabel. "Still processing," Miller snapped. "Why don't you make yourself useful and go monitor the east entrance?" Schmidt shifted his weight, a man standing on the edge of a cliff. "Look, Greg, it's been over an hour. Maybe we should just let her go with a warning." "Are you questioning my professional judgment, Officer Schmidt?" Miller's voice rose, a weapon of public humiliation aimed directly at his partner. "Because if you are, I can easily add insubordination during a security crisis to today's official report. Is that what you want?" Schmidt's spine, which had momentarily straightened, collapsed back into its usual defeated slump. "No," he mumbled. Just checking in." "Then check out," Miller dismissed him with a flick of his wrist. As Schmidt retreated, defeated, Miller turned his attention to Isabel's purse, which was still on the desk. Time for an additional screening. He upended the bag, its personal contents cascading across the cold metal surface. His fingers sifted through her possessions with an invasive, violating deliberation. A wallet, keys, a protein bar, her small notebook. And at the bottom, a plastic card with the FBI logo. "Well, well, well," he purred, holding it up to the light. "A fake federal ID. Now that is a serious, serious felony." The card was clearly marked FBI Athletic Facilities, a gym pass, but Miller chose to see only what fit his predetermined narrative. "Impersonating a federal officer. Now we're getting somewhere." Jenna, the analyst, reappeared in the doorway, clutching a file folder like a shield. "Sir," she began, her voice shaking but firm. "I have information regarding—" "Did I call for you?" Miller cut her off, his voice a whip crack. "One more interruption from you, and you can clean out your desk before lunch. Am I understood?" Behind Jenna, Mr. Evans returned, this time with another man, Assistant Security Director Crane. Miller, Crane said, his tone neutral but carrying a clear note of authority. What is the status here? Miller stood straighter, addressing a superior but still refusing to yield dominance. We have a potential security breach, sir. Subject attempted unauthorized entry with falsified credentials, then presented a counterfeit FBI identification card. I am in the process of preparing formal charges. Crane frowned. Have you run her information through the National Crime Information Center database? I know how to do my job, Crane, Miller replied, a sharp, insubordinate edge creeping into his voice. Maybe you should be more concerned with the Aegis contract renewal evaluations coming up next month. I hear my uncle is taking a very personal interest in performance reviews this quarter. The threat, crude and brutally effective, hung in the air. Miller's uncle, the senior vice president at Aegis, the contractor that employed every single guard in the building, including Crane. The assistant director's expression hardened, but he took a half step back. He was choosing his battle, and this wasn't it. Keep me updated, he said, before retreating down the hall with Evans in tow. On the security camera, Isabel noticed the small indicator light switch from a steady red to a slow, rhythmic blinking. Executive override activated. They were in control now. Miller sat down at the computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard with bureaucratic fury. I'm preparing your permanent removal documentation, he announced, the upward curl of his mouth radiating pure satisfaction. You will be blacklisted from every federal facility in the United States. Permanently. He picked up the desk phone, dialing with a theatrical flourish. Yes, this is Officer Miller at the Chicago Federal Building. I need local police assistance with a trespasser impersonating a federal agent. He rattled off the address, adding, Advise units to approach with caution. Subject has shown signs of escalating instability and may be violent. Schmidt appeared at the doorway one last time, a new, desperate determination on his face. Miller, I've been checking her credentials more thoroughly on the secondary system. He held up a printout, his hand shaking. There are some major inconsistencies with your report. This name, it matches an active federal— Give me that, Miller interrupted, snatching the paper from his hand. He glanced at it for a fraction of a second, before crumpling it into a ball and stuffing it into his pocket. Your security access is temporarily suspended, Schmidt. Surrender your badge and weapon until this situation is fully resolved. Schmidt hesitated, his hand moving protectively towards his identification. Now, Miller demanded, his palm outstretched. Or would you rather try explaining to your wife how you lost your full pension eligibility 6 months before you were scheduled to retire? The threat landed like a sledgehammer. Schmidt, defeated, slowly unpinned his badge. He placed it in Miller's waiting hand, then retreated, every line of his body screaming failure. Now, wielding the authority of 2 men, Miller returned to the computer with a renewed, almost manic vigor. Let's make this official, he announced, typing rapidly, narrating his tapestry of lies aloud as he created them. Subject exhibited aggressive and erratic behavior when approached, refused to comply with standard security screening measures, verbally threatened an officer when asked for valid identification. Isabel watched him, a silent observer as he dug his own professional grave, one keystroke at a time. She decided to give him a little more rope. Why are you doing this? She asked, her tone not confrontational, but one of genuine academic curiosity. Miller paused, thrown off balance by the simple question. Doing what? My job. Treating me differently than the 17 other people who entered this building. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm applying proper security protocols to an individual I deemed to be suspicious. What was it, specifically, Isabel pressed gently, that made me suspicious? Experience, Miller spat, resuming his furious typing. 15 years at this desk teaches you to recognize who belongs and who doesn't. And I don't belong because—" The trap was set with such exquisite subtlety that he never saw the jaws closing around him. "Because people like you always have an agenda," he burst out, his carefully constructed composure finally shattering. His typing became more forceful, the clacking of the keys punctuating his words. "Always trying to get where you shouldn't be, demanding special treatment, playing the victim. Someone needs to maintain standards. Someone needs to protect these institutions from being overrun." Every word was a nail in his professional coffin. Every syllable a soundbite for the prosecution, every hateful utterance captured forever by the silently blinking eye of the camera on the ceiling. A commotion in the hallway drew Miller's attention. The local police had arrived. He stood, puffing out his chest and straightening his uniform, preparing for his moment of triumph. "Wait here," he instructed, gesturing to a young, terrified-looking junior security officer to watch the door. "Don't let her leave." As Miller reached for the doorknob, a new voice, a voice that carried the effortless weight of absolute command, echoed from the doorway. "Officer Miller, I don't believe you'll be needing them." Deputy Director Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway, his 6'4" frame filling the entire space. Behind him, 4 senior FBI agents in impeccable dark suits formed a human wall, a silent, immovable barrier between the small security office and the now silent lobby. Miller turned, his initial irritation flashing across his face, quickly replaced by relief when he spotted the FBI credentials clipped to Thorne's lapel. "Sir," Miller said, his posture immediately more deferential. "Thank you for responding so quickly. I've detained a woman here who was attempting to infiltrate your facility using falsified credentials." Thorne said nothing. He simply stepped to the side, a silent, damning invitation for Miller to keep talking, to keep digging. "She's been belligerent, uncooperative, and even presented a counterfeit FBI identification card," Miller continued, his narrative gathering steam. "I've already contacted Chicago PD to process her arrest for impersonation of a federal officer, resisting and—" "Officer Miller," Thorne interrupted, his voice quiet but resonating with an authority that vibrated in the very air. "Have you ever had the pleasure of meeting the director of the Federal Bureau of Aviation, Isabel Sterling?" The words hit Miller like a physical blow. His torrent of lies and accusations stopped mid-sentence. His brain stuttered, struggling to process the horrifying implication. "The director? No, I—" Thorne stepped fully into the room and extended a hand towards Isabel. "Director Sterling," he said, his voice laced with a profound and sincere apology. "On behalf of the entire Chicago field office, I am deeply sorry for this unacceptable reception." The blood drained from Gregory Miller's face. The color vanished, leaving behind a waxy, grayish pallor. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. Reality had just crashed through the flimsy walls of his prejudice with the force of a wrecking ball. Isabel rose from her chair, accepting Thorne's hand with quiet, regal dignity. "Deputy Director Thorne," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I see you received my signal." "Yes, Director," Thorne replied, his eyes filled with a cold fury. "We've been monitoring this situation for the past 47 minutes. He turned his gaze back to Miller, whose confident demeanor had not just evaporated, but had been sucked into a black hole of his own making. "Officer Miller," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low pitch. "You have just starred in an unannounced field inspection of security protocols and bias incident response." I was just following procedure," Miller stammered, his words stumbling over each other. "The director, she didn't identify herself properly. I had no way of knowing." "Is threatening to make a federal employee disappear part of your standard procedure, Officer Miller?" Thorne asked, holding up a small tablet. He tapped the screen, and Miller's own voice, greasy with menace, filled the tiny room. "People who don't belong, they just disappear in our system sometimes. No one would even look for someone like you." Miller's eyes darted frantically around the room, a cornered rat searching for an escape that didn't exist. They finally settled on the security camera, the small blinking red light now mocking him with each silent pulse. Isabel stepped forward, her small stature somehow filling the entire room. When she spoke, her voice was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of institutional power, of personal resolve, and of righteous, biblical anger. "Officer Miller," she began, her voice calm and lethally precise. "In the past 90 minutes, you have committed 17 separate violations of federal security protocols, 11 violations of United States civil rights statutes, 4 distinct instances of felony abuse of authority, and 3 documented acts of criminal intimidation against fellow security personnel." She listed each offense with the methodical precision of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "What you don't know, officer," she continued, her gaze unwavering, "is that this specific field office has registered the highest number of racial discrimination complaints in the entire Bureau for the last 18 months. Complaints that, quite mysteriously, seem to disappear from the system just days after being filed." Her eyes, cold and hard as diamonds, bored into him. "Your disgusting behavior today wasn't just witnessed by the dozens of people in this building. It was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence in a 6-month federal investigation into systemic corruption, civil rights abuses, and contract fraud within Aegis Secure Solutions." Miller's gaze shot to Schmidt, who was now standing in the doorway, his face a mask of horrified vindication. He looked at Jenna, whose earlier act of terrified kindness now looked like an act of profound moral courage. He looked at Evans and Crane, who were observing from a safe distance, their faces unreadable masks of damage control. "I was just doing my job," Miller whispered, the words hollow, a desperate plea to a court that had already passed sentence. "No," Isabel corrected him, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "You were using a badge and a uniform to indulge your own pathetic bigotry, and it appears you have been getting away with it for your entire career. That ends today." Thorne nodded to 2 of his agents, who stepped forward. "Officer Thompson, you are to surrender your security credentials, your access cards, and your weapon immediately. You are being placed on administrative leave pending a full criminal investigation." As the badge was unpinned from his chest, the full weight of the consequences of his own hateful actions finally seemed to register in Miller's eyes. It was the sudden, vertiginous drop of a man who has just confidently stepped off a cliff he never even saw. "And this isn't just about you, Officer Miller," Director Sterling said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room. "This is about every single person who enabled you, who protected you, and who looked the other way. And trust me, I have a list. If you believe it's high time those lists came to light, smash that like button and let us know in the comments who you think should be held accountable next." The Philadelphia field office was descended upon by a quiet storm over the next 72 hours. Teams of internal affairs investigators moved through the security department with the grim, methodical precision of a forensics team, their tablets and laptops illuminating a dark history of abuse. Access logs, security footage archives, complaint records, decades of carefully buried secrets were being unearthed. Miller sat alone in his sad little apartment, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and defeat. His tie was loosened, his shirt rumpled from 18 sleepless hours. His phone, which had been buzzing non-stop, vibrated against the coffee table. It was the 7th call from Aegis corporate executives in as many hours. He stared at the caller ID, watching it buzz itself into silence like a dying insect. The text message that followed was short and brutal. "Do not speak to anyone. Legal representation en route. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a gag order. Miles away, in a glass-walled conference room that reeked of money and panic, the Aegis Crisis Management Team assembled. Senior Vice President Robert Miller, Officer Miller's uncle, a man with a soft face and hard, merciless eyes, paced the room's perimeter like a caged panther. Corporate attorneys spread documents across the polished mahogany table. "We terminate him immediately. Full stop," the VP announced. "Issue a press statement. We are shocked and appalled. His actions do not reflect our company's deep commitment to diversity and respect." Make it clear. This was one bad apple. Isolated, unforeseeable. In the FBI's temporary command center set up in the field office, Director Sterling reviewed years of security footage. The pattern emerged with the sickening clarity of a cancer diagnosis on an X-ray. Hundreds, possibly thousands, of non-white visitors subjected to long, humiliating, enhanced screenings while their white counterparts sailed through. The timestamps were the silent, damning witness. Average wait time for white visitors, 47 seconds. For minorities, 12.3 minutes. "Director," a young analyst called out, her voice tight with excitement. "We found something. Cross-referencing the financial records with the complaint logs." Isabel leaned over the glowing display. Every single discrimination complaint filed against Gregory Miller showed the same digital footprint. Initial documentation. Preliminary investigation opened. And then nothing. The case files were digitally erased. "Now," Isabel instructed, her voice calm but electric. "Cross-reference those exact dates and timestamps with Aegis's invoices to a certain consulting firm owned by the wife of the previous federal security director." The analyst's fingers flew. Data points aligned on the screen with the clean, undeniable precision of a firing squad. 17 complaints vanished from the system immediately following 17 large payments from Aegis. Miller's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. It was his uncle. "Say nothing, Greg. Admit nothing. We're handling this." His uncle's voice was sharp, brittle. "They have recordings, Robert," Miller replied, his own voice a hollow, lifeless thing. "They have everything. Everything I said to her." A long, cold silence stretched across the connection. Then his uncle's voice, stripped of all pretense, all familial connection. "Then you're on your own." The line went dead. Officer Schmidt, now witness Schmidt, sat across from an FBI interviewer. The retirement photo on his desk, showing a younger, happier man, seemed to mock him from the background. "Yes," he confirmed, his voice steady for the first time in years. "I witnessed Officer Miller apply different standards based on race consistently for the entire time we worked together. I reported it formally, twice in 2022, once again in 2023. He paused, the shame a physical weight on his shoulders. "The complaints just disappeared. After the second one, they moved me to the night shift for 3 months. I got the message." Jenna, the analyst, provided a treasure trove of names, dates, and specific incidents. A mental catalog of abuses she had witnessed, but had been too afraid to formally report. "We all knew," she admitted, her eyes downcast. "We called him the gatekeeper, but he was protected. His uncle, the Aegis contract. Anyone who spoke up found themselves reassigned to the records basement, or, worse, their contract just wasn't renewed." The dam had broken. A flood of evidence poured in. 17 current and former security officers came forward with nearly identical stories. Internal emails, which Aegis thought they had deleted, were recovered from server backups, discussing Miller's proactive approach with winking euphemisms and tacit approval. In the opulent executive boardroom of Aegis Secure Solutions' downtown headquarters, CEO Gail Winters faced the FBI representatives with the practiced, icy composure of a career corporate sociopath. "This is clearly the unfortunate action of one rogue employee," she stated, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We have very strict, award-winning anti-discrimination policies that—" Director Sterling slid a thick, heavy binder across the table. It landed with a solid, definitive thud. 342 complaints, across 62 federal facilities, in the past 5 years alone, all involving your personnel, all mysteriously vanishing without action. She opened the file. It was a murderer's row of evidence: emails, financial records, sworn affidavits, internal memos bearing the Aegis letterhead. "This isn't about one bad apple, Ms. Winters. This is about a poisoned orchard. Your company has systematically and deliberately buried discrimination complaints, intimidated witnesses, and retaliated against anyone brave enough to speak up." The CEO's corporate mask slipped, just for a second, revealing a flicker of pure animal panic. "These are concerning allegations, if true. We will, of course, launch an immediate internal—" "This isn't an allegation," Sterling interrupted, her voice cutting through the corporate bullshit like a diamond blade. "It's evidence. Evidence of contract fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and hundreds of civil rights violations. Your company, Ms. Winters, is now under federal investigation." The news broke 48 hours later, hitting the headlines like a bombshell. FBI uncovers years of systematic discrimination by major federal security contractor. Miller's name didn't appear until paragraph 3, his 15-year reign of petty terror summarized in a few clinical, devastating sentences. His phone stopped ringing entirely. The lawyers from Aegis no longer answered his calls. His union representative replied with a terse, 2-sentence email. "Given the overwhelming audio and video evidence, we regret to inform you that we cannot provide representation in this matter." As Miller sat in the dark, watching the scandal unfold on cable news, more stories emerged. Security officers from facilities across the country started coming forward, emboldened. Former Aegis employees began leaking documents, revealing pressure from senior management to scrutinize certain profiles more intensively than others. The public reaction was a firestorm. Protests formed outside Aegis headquarters. Government oversight committees announced emergency hearings. Within a week, 3 major federal agencies suspended their billion-dollar contracts with the company, pending the investigation's outcome. Miller finally turned off the TV. The sudden silence of his apartment pressed in on him, a physical, crushing weight. The doorbell rang. The sound was alien, shocking in his self-imposed isolation. He stumbled to the door, peered through the peephole, and his blood ran cold. 2 figures in dark suits stood on his doorstep, their posture unmistakably official. As one of them held up a warrant, Miller realized the terrible truth. His uncle, to save himself and the company, had already given them everything. He hadn't just been cut loose, he had been served up as the sacrifice. The Federal Administrative Hearing Room was a theater of bureaucratic execution, humming with a restrained, sterile energy. Morning light filtered through high, barred windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted through the air like the suspended ashes of dead careers. Miller sat alone at the respondents' table. His court-appointed union rep, a man with tired eyes, maintained a careful 6 inches of separation from him, a physical quarantine from his professional disease. Across the aisle, the government's table was occupied by 3 sharp, merciless attorneys from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Their preparations were calm, methodical. They didn't even glance Miller's way. Their case was not in their arguments. It was in the 12 thick evidence binders stacked between them like a barricade. Each page was another brick in the wall being built around the rest of Miller's life. "All rise," the bailiff droned. The 3-member panel entered. An administrative judge, flanked by a steely-eyed representative from the Office of Personnel Management and another from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, took her seat. In the matter of security clearance revocation and employment termination for Officer Gregory Miller, she began, her voice a monotone instrument of judgment. This panel will now hear evidence regarding multiple allegations of civil rights violations, felony abuse of authority, and the falsification of federal records. Miller's representative stood, his posture already a white flag of surrender. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a statement of mitigating circumstances. While not disputing the recorded evidence, Officer Miller maintains he was acting in accordance with established, if unofficial, protocols consistent with his training and— Your Honor, the lead justice attorney interrupted, rising so smoothly he seemed to levitate. Before the respondent attempts to distribute his personal responsibility across the entire federal government, we would like to present evidence that his actions were not only deliberate, but represented a calculated pattern of behavior spanning his entire 15-year career. The first witness they called was Schmidt. Miller's former partner avoided eye contact as he took the stand, his posture that of a man finally setting down a burden he had carried for far too long. Officer Schmidt, the attorney began, in your 14 years working alongside the respondent, did you ever observe him apply differential treatment to visitors based on their race or ethnicity? Schmidt cleared his throat. Yes, he said, his voice stronger than Miller had ever heard it. Consistently. Daily. And what happened when you attempted to report these observations through official channels? The first time my supervisor told me I needed to learn how real security works. The second time, my shift schedule was changed to nights for 3 months. After that, he paused, his gaze finally flicking to Miller, a look not of hatred but of pity and contempt. I stopped reporting it. The morning was a relentless drumbeat of testimony. Jenna, the analyst, coolly and articulately describing Miller's intimidation tactics. Mr. Evans recounting, with meticulous detail, how security complaints against Miller would mysteriously vanish after being forwarded to Aegis corporate management. A parade of former visitors, a doctor, a lawyer, a grandmother visiting her grandson, each sharing eerily similar stories of public humiliation and arbitrary discrimination at Gregory Miller's checkpoint. After the lunch recess, the panel viewed the video evidence. It was a devastating, soul-crushing montage compiled from years of archived security footage. The systemic pattern was undeniable. A white man in jeans and a t-shirt walking through unchecked, while a black man in a tailored suit was pulled aside for an enhanced screening. An elderly Asian woman forced to empty her entire purse, while a young white woman with a bulging backpack was waved through with a smile. The timestamps were the nails in his coffin. When Miller finally took the stand, his former arrogance had been replaced by a raw, animal desperation. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a sympathetic face, and finding only cold, impartial judgment. I was just being thorough, he insisted, his voice cracking under the weight of the lies. Security work requires making judgment calls. Some profiles require additional scrutiny based on statistical risk factors. And what specific statistical risk factor led you to detain, harass, and illegally threaten the director of the FBI? The attorney asked, his voice soft and deadly. Miller hesitated. The trap was obvious, but there was no way around it. She didn't look like she belonged there. Didn't look like she belonged, the attorney repeated, letting the ugly words hang in the silent room. And what, exactly, does someone who belongs in a federal building look like, Officer Miller? The question remained unanswered. Instead, the attorney played the recording from the security office. Miller's voice, his own voice, filled the room, naked and venomous. People who don't belong disappear all the time. No one would even look for someone like you. In his closing statement, Miller abandoned his lawyer's prepared remarks. Desperation and years of self-pity finally fractured his composure. "Everyone does it," he blurted out, his voice a pathetic whine. "I'm just the one who got caught. There's an understanding, an unspoken rule about who gets a harder look. It comes from the top down." The panel deliberated for just 27 minutes. Their decision was unanimous. Employment terminated, effective immediately. All federal security clearances permanently and irrevocably revoked. Pension and retirement benefits forfeited. A full referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution on charges of civil rights violations, threatening a federal officer, and falsification of official records. As a stunned Miller exited the hearing room, a process server was waiting for him in the hallway, slapping a civil suit from the ACLU into his hand. When he got outside, he found an empty space where his car used to be. It had been repossessed that morning. It was the first domino to fall in the complete financial collapse that would follow. His phone rang. An unknown number. "Uncle Robert?" he answered, a pathetic glimmer of hope in his voice. "This is the Aegis Secure Solutions legal department," a cold, unfamiliar voice responded. "We are calling to formally inform you that your company-provided health insurance coverage was terminated as of midnight last night. Furthermore, any public statements you make regarding company policies or procedures will constitute a direct violation of your non-disclosure agreement. We will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." The line went dead before he could even reply. As Miller stood staring at the empty parking space, a news crew spotted him. Cameras turned towards his face like predators scenting blood. 6 months later, the Chicago FBI field office security checkpoint was unrecognizable. It gleamed under new, brighter lighting. Gone were the intimidating dark corners and the windowless screening rooms. In their place stood an open, transparent design, with low privacy screens and clearly posted procedures in 3 languages. Jenna, now proudly wearing the insignia of a federal compliance officer, was conducting a training session for newly hired security personnel. "The touchstone of our new approach is simple," she explained, gesturing to a flowchart on a large monitor. "Consistency. Every single visitor receives the exact same screening steps, in the exact same order. We have eliminated subjective judgment from the equation." The trainees, a group that reflected the actual diversity of the city they served, took notes. "Our performance metrics are now publicly displayed," Jenna continued. "Average wait times, secondary screening percentages, complaint resolution rates, all updated in real time and reviewed daily by both FBI oversight and an independent civilian board." Across the building, Schmidt, his early retirement rescinded, was leading an internal affairs briefing. His former discomfort was gone, replaced by the quiet authority of a man who had finally chosen the right side. "The new anonymous reporting system bypasses all contractor management entirely," he explained. "Any complaint, no matter how minor, goes simultaneously and directly to FBI Internal Affairs and an independent civil rights monitoring group. There are no more files to be lost, no more complaints to be misplaced." On Capitol Hill, Director Isabel Sterling testified before the House Oversight Committee. Her composed demeanor was a stark counterpoint to the charged, theatrical atmosphere of the room. "Director Sterling," the committee chairman began, "was your experience at the Chicago field office truly a random inspection, or were you specifically investigating Officer Thompson?" "Neither, Congressman," Isabel responded, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room. "My visit was part of a coordinated, proactive test, prompted by a clear pattern we identified in dismissed and suppressed complaints. After the 7th different complainant of color reported being threatened with disappearance at that specific checkpoint, we recognized that the only way to truly document the systemic rot was to experience it firsthand. The hearing revealed the full, ugly scope of the problem." Thompson wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a deeply diseased system. Statistics scrolled across the large displays in the committee room. 74% of minority visitors nationwide subjected to enhanced screening, compared to just 12% of white visitors. The resulting legislation passed with rare, swift bipartisan support. The Federal Facility Equal Access Act established permanent independent oversight of all security contractors, mandated body cameras for all checkpoint personnel, created a publicly accessible national complaint tracking system, and required annual rigorous certification in non-discriminatory security practices. Meanwhile, Gregory Miller, now 60 pounds lighter, his face a hollow mask of his former self, applied for a minimum wage security position at a suburban shopping mall. The hiring manager, a young woman half his age, scanned his application. Her expression suddenly shifted. "Gregory Miller. Wait, aren't you that guy? From the news? The one who threatened the FBI director?" He left without waiting for a response, another rejection slip to add to the growing pile on the passenger seat of his beat-up Ford Escort. 1 year to the day after the incident, Director Isabel Sterling stepped through the revolving doors of the Chicago FBI field office. The transformation was immediate and profound. It wasn't just the brighter lights or the new, open layout. It was the atmosphere itself. The tension that once hummed just beneath the surface, like faulty electrical wiring, was gone. In its place was a calm, steady current of professional focus. The security team that greeted her reflected the city of Chicago. Officer Mendez, a young Latino man, processed her credentials with efficient, respectful courtesy, applying the exact same procedural rhythm he had used for the elderly white man in front of her. "Good morning, Director Sterling," he said, returning her identification. "You're expected in conference room 3. Where Miller's desk once stood like a troll's bridge, an information kiosk now offered visitor guidance. A large digital dashboard overhead showed the real-time metrics. Average wait time, 1 minute, 42 seconds. Secondary screening rate, 7%. Active complaints, 0. Inside, she met with Jenna, Schmidt, and Evans. Their former nervousness and fear were replaced with pride. "The most surprising outcome," Evans noted, "has been the dramatic improvement in actual security. When officers stopped wasting time on their own prejudiced profiling and started applying consistent, behavior-based protocols, they actually began identifying more genuine security threats." Schmidt nodded in agreement. "Last month we caught a guy in a $3,000 suit attempting industrial espionage. His behavior set off 6 red flags in the new system. In the old days, Miller would have waved him right through." Later that night, the scene shifts to a dimly lit, cavernous warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Gregory Miller, his face illuminated by the flickering glow of a vending machine, patrolled the empty corridors. This was his life now, a night watchman, a ghost haunting the graveyard shift, the only employment his permanently tarnished record could secure. He passed a dusty break room where a small television was on. An interview was playing. It was Director Sterling discussing the sweeping reforms that had been implemented in federal security over the past year. "The Miller incident," the news anchor called it, "has become a watershed moment in federal civil rights enforcement, a case study now taught at the FBI Academy." Miller's face hardened as he listened to his legacy being defined. He was not the protector of institutions he had imagined himself to be. He was the cautionary tale, the footnote, the villain in someone else's story of triumph. He continued his lonely rounds, his reflection a pale, translucent figure in the darkened windows. A ghost, drifting through a world where he no longer mattered. The next day, in a different city, Isabel Sterling, now dressed as a civilian, approached the security checkpoint of another federal building. She showed no credentials. The officer on duty, a young black woman, greeted her with the same standardized professional welcome, now used for all visitors. "ID and purpose of visit, please," she requested, her tone polite but firm. Isabel presented her personal driver's license. The officer processed it with efficient courtesy, completely unaware she was interacting with the director of the FBI. She was just another citizen, receiving equal treatment under fair, standardized protocols. As she passed through the checkpoint, a small, genuine smile touched Isabel's lips. This is how it should have always been. She realized in that moment the ultimate truth about power. True power wasn't the petty, bullying authority to make others feel small, to make them disappear. True power was the strength, the vision, and the courage to finally make everyone be seen. Don't let another moment of injustice go unnoticed. Hit that subscribe button right now and become part of the Black Stories community, where we expose the power abusers and celebrate the heroes who refuse to back down. Like this video, comment with your own stories, and share it if you believe in demanding accountability at every single level. And make sure you turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss our weekly drops of satisfying justice stories that prove karma is very, very real. And sometimes she carries a badge. This is Black Stories, because some beats are best served with a side of justice.